as the accusations continue to fly back and forth between Washington and Moscow about what exactly happened on a beach on a holiday in Crimea that killed a lot of Russian tourists in Sevastopol in the southern part of Crimea. Some are claiming that it was a missile that was intercepted or partially intercepted by Russia and landed on some beachgoers. Others in Russia are claiming that it was targeted at the beach and that they're demanding some retaliation. Right now, lots of accusations, very little facts to go on the ground. But like we always are here at Daniel Davis Deep Dive, we want to get to the bottom of what's really going on, no matter what anybody may want to slant things. And we have an exceptionally good guest with us today to try to at least make some sense of what we have based on the evidence that we do have. And that is MIT professor Ted Postol. Ted, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be here.
And man, I mean, we always love having you on, and so do our guests. Always love it. But this one is maybe even more sensitive than some of the other ones because of what's going on here, and your keen eye knowing what to look for. And what we have here is some information. First of all, I want to talk about, in case anybody may not have seen what happened on I believe it was Sunday. There was a strike on a beach on a holiday in Russia that killed a bunch of people on a beach. And based on some of the evidence, it looked like, and Russia certainly claimed that it was an American ATACMS missile. And we're going to show some of the things about what that means here in a minute. But the U.S. ambassador was summoned to the foreign ministry for a significant reproach after that had happened. And, they're asking what's going on. So it was a huge deal in Russia. And in the aftermath, the U.S. State Department official Matt Miller was asked, what's the deal?
I've seen the comments from the government of Moscow. I think they pertain to the reported strike in Crimea. I will just tell you what the ambassador said when she met with the Russian Foreign Ministry, and that is, of course, that we lament any civilian loss of life in this war. We provide weapons to Ukraine so it can defend its sovereign territory against armed aggression. That includes in Crimea, which of course is part of Ukraine. And Russia could stop this war today and end the suffering caused by the war Russia launched today if it would stop its occupation of sovereign Ukrainian territory and stop launching attacks on civilians.
Okay, well, first of all, it's interesting what he didn't say. He didn't say it wasn't our missile. He didn't say we didn't do it on purpose. He just said it happened and then tried to pivot over to something else. Well, it's Russia's fault anyway. If they wanted the war to stop, they could just leave and go home, pick up their toys and all that kind of stuff, which is never helpful to belittle your opponent, especially when you're talking about a nuclear superpower, and just kind of talk to them like you're a parent to a child. But that seems to be kind of normal for us these days.
Well, I have to say it's a shameful display of indifference to the truth. That's the way I would describe it. And if this is the best a State Department spokesman can do, it would be better if they said nothing, because this is just a shameful display of indifference. That's my reaction.
Yeah, I mean, whatever actually happened, and I know we're going to unpack that here in just a second. The fact that civilians on a beach were killed by an American weapon is a deplorable situation. And I mean, even if you want to say, okay, we're supporting Ukraine, we're openly going to do that because your forces, Russia, have invaded their country and there's an ongoing war. And so it's fair game for your military targets to be hit. But this went off course. I mean, something like that. But like you said, to just mock the complaints on the other side, and other than giving away a token little, well, any loss of life is bad, but, and then you roll over to it. It's just, like you say, it's not a good look. And then now we're trying to figure out what actually did happen. So first of all, I want to show that video again. Gary, if you can roll that from the start, that one you're on right now, I think. Because it's going to show some scenes of in the water. And I want people to pay a particular attention to all the plumes in the water that throw up here. It's going to loop back around here again. And Ted, I wonder if you can kind of tell us what this tells you about, first of all, what kind of munition it was, And then secondly, and Gary, once he reloads this here, it's going to show what some of these ATACMs actually look like and what the cluster munitions look like, et cetera. But tell us what you see in this video.
Well, what the ATACMs is delivering is, of course, what they call a cluster munition. And the cluster munition is basically a small explosive device that has shrapnel in it so that it will wound people at significant ranges. And the proper delivery in combat is relatively late in the arrival of the missile, because you don't want the individual munitions falling over too large an area where there'll be large open spaces where you don't have a lethal effect. So if you're going after troops and the missile's designed to do that, then you release the munitions relatively close to the ground, and so you spread them out over a large area, but with relatively high density. For example, they might explode 10 meters apart, 15 meters apart. And what you see here is that these things are exploding hundreds of meters apart. So it's a clear indication that the submunitions were released at a much higher altitude than the particular weapon was designed to do, which suggests that the missile was somehow malfunctioning, and probably malfunctioning from what we know, because it may have been hit by an air defense interceptor.
Now, what the Russians are claiming, that there were 5 ATACMS missiles that were fired, presumably from the Odessa region. We're going to look at a map here in a few minutes, but that 4 of them were intercepted and knocked down. And they said some of the debris from some of the others that were hit actually also fell on the beach. And then they said that apparently one they didn't get. But if I'm understanding correctly from what you're saying, the physical evidence here appears that maybe they got them all, or that the last one still was able to discharge its submunitions. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's of course very hard to know without a clear map of where if you sat down with a map of where the munitions fell, which you certainly could do if you were Russian, it might have been from multiple missiles breaking up, but I don't think so. My offhand guess, and I should say it's a guess, is that there was a single missile that was damaged by an air defense intercept attempt, and it broke up and it fused, improperly fused at a higher altitude.
So an interceptor missile of whatever the Russian air defense systems in that area is would not destroy the incoming ATACMS, but just disable it and knock it off course so that it lands somewhere besides its intended target?
Yeah, but when you have an attempted intercept, you're typically going at this missile from the front. In the case of the Russian air defenses, they're going to often have a good shot at it slightly from the side. And this thing is traveling at maybe Mach 1, Mach 1.5, because it's been gliding for a long distance. It's not a ballistic missile like other kinds of missiles. It goes on a ballistic trajectory. It's powered on to about a 40-kilometer altitude. Then it coasts using what's called body lift. If I have an angle of attack relative to my direction of motion, I can get lift on the vehicle, and it glides for 150, even 200, 250 kilometers, depending on the design of the particular missile. And by the time it reaches a target area, it's going relatively slowly. It's going at maybe perhaps Mach 1, Mach 1.5, or even probably around Mach 1 or 1.5. And so that's an aircraft target. I mean, that's not a target that's well beyond the capability of the first line air defense system like S-300, 400, or 500. So now the interceptor comes by, and of course you never can you rarely can perfectly place the interceptor and the target, in this case the missile, the attacking missile. So when you explode the warhead on your interceptor, it blows out fragments, and the fragments could in fact, it looks like here it missed the front end of the missile. It failed to destroy the submunition section, and the missile broke up and was probably tumbling, and then just released all the submunitions. That's of course a wild guess, but it's not silly. Let me put it that way. This is a common event that can occur with attempted air defense intercepts.
So I next want to look at the claim by many that this was a targeted attack against a beach where whoever launched this, whether it was Ukraine or whether it was American expertise that did what Ukraine told them, that part's unclear. But I want to show that there actually was a military target very near this place. Gary, if you can throw that first map up there, you see in the red at the top there, that's Sevastopol, and in the area down in the south here, you'll see a larger picture of that in a second. But that's where the beach was hit there in the little circle with the red dot in it. And right above that, at the Belbek Air Base, which is what could have been the target, and I think it has been attacked in the past. And then, at least from what's being reported, Ted, is that this was launched from somewhere in the Odessa area. And I want to back out to a further map so you can see Odessa there in the upper left-hand corner. And then that red area there is where the beach and the air base were on the Crimean Peninsula here. So based on what you see here, can you make any assessment over whether there's evidence that this was targeted to the beach or that it might have been going to the air base and instead was diverted by an interceptor missile? How do you see it?
Well, if I had to take a wild guess, let me underscore that this is a wild guess. It's not impossible that it was targeted on the air base and the missile was hit by an air defense interceptor, and it could have changed. Remember, this is a glide vehicle, and it can change its orientation. If it's hit, it could lose its aerodynamic orientation, and if it loses its physical orientation, and then could break up later, because it doesn't have to break up instantly. And if it changes its direction, changes its orientation, it will slide just as it drops. And that's a possibility that comes to mind. It doesn't appear to me, again, with very minimal information here, that this was an intended attack on the beach, because these submunitions would have been much, much more closely distributed. They would have been packed much more closely, and you would have seen a line of these things, multiple things going off, and it would be a highly lethal environment within the area where these submunitions landed. Just think of an armored column that you're going after in the military. That's what this is designed to go after.
Yeah,
you'd have a dense field of these munitions going off, and pretty much any infantry that's in that field is either dead or maimed.
But, yeah, you can see from this picture here, this is spread over many hundreds of meters,
yes.
So it's not dense at all.
So if you had to guess, I would say it was not an intended attack. It may have been reckless, and for example, there's no reason they couldn't have executed an attack like this at night. People aren't on the beach at night. If there's any concern at all about unwanted civilian casualties, well, you just do the attack at night. I mean,
right.
The Russians have been attacking at night.
The launch point, because a lot of these things are mobile, so they could change the launch point and remove that risk if they actually start to do so.
But a lot of the Russian attacks have been at night, and part of the reason for that, I assume, is you never have perfect accuracy in spite of all the effort to do so. And people are out in the street during the day. And if you're going to land close to a military target but not hit it directly, the chances of unwanted civilian casualties is lower if you do it at night. You know, how
Yeah,
much lower
yeah.
depends on.
So yeah, I mean that's something that certainly could have been done, but what we have is what did happen, and like you say, there's a lot of facts we don't know. We can make some inferences here, but what we also do know is that the Kremlin has been extremely angry, and what they're claiming is that because this was a U.S. bomb, and we had what they view here. This is Dmitry Peskov, one of the spokesmen for the Kremlin. The direct involvement of the United States, he claims there cannot but be. This cannot be without consequences. And that is one of the big concerns to me, because, you know, a lot of the people on the Russian side aren't going to care about what should have happened or what did happen. All they see is what the results were. And they see that beachgoers were killed on a beach, and they want some kind of response. Now, I've talked to a number of people, and they think that Putin remains very calculated in what he does, and he's not going to take any action, however emotional, that's going to cause more difficulty for the Russian side. And he's always got this tension between not wanting to escalate and causing more trouble, but also responding to things that happen like this. My concern over all of this, though, is that regardless of what the immediate response is here, that we could get into this escalating ladder where you keep climbing up, and the Russia does something, we do something in retaliation back, and then you end up with the potential to use nuclear weapons. I mean, that's always the end result that I'm afraid of the most, and that's not without fear, because here's what Vladimir Putin said earlier this month.
Американцы – единственная страна, Соединенные Штаты, которая использовала ядерное оружие во Второй мировой войне. Хиросима, Нагасаки – 20 килотонн. Наше тактическое ядерное оружие – 70-75 килотонн. Это такое ядерное тактическое оружие. Давайте не доводить не только до использования, а даже до угрозы использования. На Западе считают, что Россия никогда этого не использует. У нас же есть ядерная доктрина. Посмотрите, что написано. Если чьи-то действия будут угрожать нашему суверенитету и территориальной целостности, мы считаем для себя возможным использовать все имеющиеся в нашем распоряжении средства. Нельзя относиться к этому легко, поверхностно. Нужно относиться профессионально.
Now, if regardless of what may happen or why, one of the reasons that I'm so adamant, especially every time I'm on this channel, things that I write, when I go on other television networks, I always say the consequences of a nuclear exchange, almost no matter how small, could just be completely catastrophic. And so we can't even get up into the side of it. We can't even risk it because the consequences are so great on a lower case. Forget about the mutually assured destruction. Then it won't matter because most of mankind will be dead. But I wonder if you can kind of explain us in graphic detail as much as you can, really what the consequences are of a nuclear detonation.
Well, it's if we're talking about a single detonation, why don't I, if Gary can go to slide 14, and here's what a single detonation over Washington, D.C. From a typical SS-18, or I think there's a modernized version called the Sarmat, if I've got that correct. And this is a missile that carries 10 warheads in the near 1 megaton range. If you want to get a sense of its size, let's go to slide number 3. If you look at slide number 3, you can see it's nearly 30 meters tall. These are typically housed in underground silos. And if you go to the next slide, number 4, they would follow a trajectory where they launched a bunch of warheads from the single single missile. The way those warheads are deployed is you have what's called a bus. The rocket launches a bus. Let me see slide 6. If you see the top on the left, you see the top of this giant missile would have a vehicle. It throws the whole vehicle, and the vehicle changes directions a little, and it can attack many independent targets. So let's go back to slide 14 and show what one of these warheads could do to Washington, keeping in mind that a single 10 cities like Washington could be hit with a single missile of this kind. It would probably be detonated at a relatively high altitude off the ground, as shown in this image. And if we go to the next slide, you would produce what's called a fireball. Shows you 1 second after the detonation of this weapon, which is off the ground. The fireball is produced by the enormous temperatures produced by the nuclear weapon when its energy is released, which happens in a few millionths of seconds. So that happens very fast. The weapon is so hot that it radiates into the air around it as X-rays. X-rays are totally absorbed by air. The air is not transparent to the X-rays. So it initially heats the air to maybe 1,000,000 degrees Kelvin initially. The inside of the weapon, when it's in the process of releasing its energy, is close to 100 million degrees Kelvin, which is about 4 or 5 times hotter than the center of the sun. So this is a catastrophic event. This superheated air becomes a bubble in the atmosphere, and it expands at millions of miles per hour initially, and slows up to eventually just be a bubble that's roughly constant in diameter after about 1 second. And so what you see here depicted is the fireball, which is inside the fireball. The air density is maybe below 1% of the atmospheric air density. The temperature of the gases in the fireball are about perhaps 8,000 degrees Kelvin, which is a couple of thousand degrees higher than the surface of the sun. So this is hot. And it is radiating per unit area about 2 to 3 times more light and heat than the equivalent surface of the sun, if you put a surface around it.
Man.
So this is really, and below on the ground, I have tried to put a cloud on the ground, because what happens is the light and heat from the fireball is so intense that concrete surfaces will explode.
Wow.
So much heat comes in that if you think of the surface, so much heat comes, and the surface can't transmit the, it gets so hot, it can't transmit the heat energy into the body of the material. So the material gets very, very hot in a thin layer, and it explodes. So that causes, of course, things are blown. Things are immediately ignited, and that turns out to be more deadly, by far more deadly than the actual effects of the blast, which is
Wow.
what people
Was
usually
never heard that. Did not know that.
Yeah, so this is quite an event. In slide 16, I show what the debris cloud looks like. Bear in mind that the fireball has this is a debris cloud created by the shock wave hitting the ground. Notice it's a significant fraction of a mile in altitude, so you can't see anything on the ground. If you were on the street, of course, you'd be dead, you'd be fried. But if you had somehow imagine a person in the street who had not been fried, you couldn't even read a street sign that was 10 feet away. So, it would just be no visibility of any kind. And then following this event, you would have mass fires started. And if I just go to maybe, excuse me a minute here.
I just found that fascinating and terrifying that this fireball could actually be hotter than the surface of the sun for a period of time. That's just unfathomable.
Yeah. So if we go to slide 103, just jumping ahead, what happens in the aftermath, the mushroom cloud rises, and you have a region of fire on the ground because buildings have collapsed, but anything that is remotely combustible is now violently on fire. And you have a vast area on the surface where fire is burning. And so it has an effect like a chimney. The air that's heated by the fire buoyantly rises vertically. And you get this circulating motion that's shown in this figure. And on the ground where the fire is actually occurring, the wind speeds can easily be 100 miles an hour. So this is just from the sort of the vacuum created by the hot rising buoyant air. And if you just want to see what happens, this is if you look at figure 118, this is a much less hostile environment. This victim tried to get out of run for safety in a firestorm in Hamburg, Germany, that occurred in I think it was 1944. And he was literally incinerated. The hot winds were 100 miles per hour. And the air temperature was above the boiling point of water. And in the case of an attack of this kind by a warhead, a modern warhead with this higher yield, you would have a fire well over 100, 150 square miles. Not a few square miles like occurred at Hamburg, which was not a nuclear attack. It was just the effects of the buoyantly rising hot air. So this is not something we want to happen anywhere, whether it's an enemy or us. And that would be one city. And you could take out 10 with a single large missile. This warheads could be spread over a whole bunch of cities in the Northeast.
Yeah, and that really resonates with me because that image you showed there is Washington D.C. That's my town, so I know all those places that disappeared underneath your graphic. So
that's why I chose it.
Yeah, well, you succeeded. You got it. Listen, we're gonna have to shut her down here because I've got to go on another network here. But as always, we're so grateful for having you on. And even when it's really awful stuff you're talking about, we need to know the truth, and we need to see that kind of stuff and be graphically aware of what is at stake here and why we need to bring this war to a rapid conclusion as soon as it can, and not have some fantasy about thinking we can ever win a war, especially if it goes to nuclear. So thank you.
This is not abstract. This is real. I mean, there's physics behind this.
Absolutely. Also, I don't know if you noticed here, another one of our viewers here was asking if there's any way they can get this slide deck.
Yes, if they write me an email at postal@mit.edu, I will send the slides. I'm trying to ask for help from because I got so many requests, but for
okay.
now, I think it's important. This is my time to get information to the public. So please send an email. Just make a very clear header. The header should be send slides of nuclear attack.
That's right. Very good. We'll have them do that.
So I can pick it out because I can miss these things.
I know you can get overwhelmed with stuff you got, but
Right,
again, thank you very much for coming on. Thank you guys for watching us. We have 2 more shows on for you today. You don't want to miss this. We have Jeffrey Sachs, always one of the great voices, especially on what's going on in the Middle East. And then we have what's huge breaking news is Julia Assange has been free. And we have Matt Ho and Scott Horton, 2 guys who've been advocating for his release for years. And you'll not want to miss that show. That's on, I believe, at 3:30 this afternoon. But just watch your local, just look at our baseline there and on our website, and you'll see the click. Be sure to see it. We'll like and subscribe. We'll see you in a little bit. Thanks.
Thank you very much.